I am Hallie Casser-Jayne, and welcome to the Hallie Casser-Jayne Show, a smart, witty, and timely podcast brought to you at a time when Americans are getting fed up with all the shouting and bickering in Washington, D.C. So I, Hallie Casser-Jayne, and veteran White House correspondent Matthew Cooper are here to offer you an insightful, engaging journey into the world of politics, always with a smile and dialogue that snap, crackles, and pops, and with all our very special guests. We strive to offer a different take on all things politics in our weekly conversations. So, pour yourselves a martini, grab a spot on your favorite sofa, and have a listen as we tackle it all and like to stir and sometimes shake things up. On this episode of the Hallie Casser-Jayne Show, we begin with our weekly conversation and our take on this week's political news. In the second half hour, stay tuned for my interview with former CNN senior political analyst, the author of Standoff, How America Became Ungovernable, Bill SCHNEIDER. This is the When All Else Fails, Create a Crisis edition of the Hallie Casser-Jayne Show. And we're just beginning. Here we go. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Hallie, how are you?
Honey, oh my God, I'm freaked out. I just had like this major thing happen right before we went on air. Everything went flying out of poltergeist in my house. But we're okay. We're okay.
Okay, we're back.
We're back. The world is
Ghost in
going.
The machine.
It's Trump coming to get me. I'm telling you
Ghost
what.
In the machine.
That's what it is. So, darling, what a week, huh? Happy birthday! Everybody was Matt's birthday yesterday. He had a great day. We wanted to wish him happy birthday on air.
Oh, thank you. It's tough being 29 again.
Again, and such a young-looking 29-year-old. I gotta tell you. Anyway, happy birthday. Okay.
Yeah. You know, first you're older than the athletes, then you're older than the actors, and you start to be older than the, politicians.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah,
it goes
and
fast,
you have your
too.
first Supreme Court justice, you're older than.
God, you're not for there. So listen, this has been a very interesting week in politics. We say that every week, but this has been peculiarly weird to me.
Why do you say that?
Because so much, it was like, you know what it was? It was like a smorgasbord of everything, kind of nothing going crazy, just kind of like, we were hit with a lot, and it was, and we went on highs, we went on lows, we went on mediums. It was, I think people are just being torn by all of this into so many different feelings and directions and what have you. So, but nothing really major. We still don't know any more today than we knew before. Incrementally, maybe. And that's what I want to talk to you about first. But before we get into what we really want to talk about, I just want to say, before we go to tape, there might be a deal on the shutdown. I don't know if you knew about this. New York Times.
No, you're
I'm breaking news. New York Times is reporting that the Senate will vote on Thursday on two separate bills that would bring an immediate end to the partial government shutdown. One backed by President Trump that includes the $5.7 billion for his border wall. That ain't going anywhere. Okay, goodbye. Good luck. That was swell. But there does seem to be a compromise plan between Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer that offers the first hint of this is what they're saying, the New York Times, a hint that there's a path out of the partial shutdown, which is now in its fifth week. And it would be, as I understand it at the moment, that they would open the government until February 7th or 8th. He would be able to give his State of the Union, and then they'll take it from there. What you think?
Well, I don't think the Dems get a lot out of the latter. I mean, all the workers just come back for like 2 weeks, right? Trump gets to have a big platform for talking about whatever he wants to talk about. And then we're back to square one. I'm not sure what the upside is for. I mean, it's great the workers would get, at least 2 weeks of pay they're not getting, and some of the back pay, I assume, but still, it feels pretty weak.
Yeah, listen, We have Bill Schneider on the show on the second half of the show, and everybody listened to it. I already did the interview. What a delicious man, and he's got some really interesting ideas. But one of the things he and I talked about was, on this cave, and I said to him that I can't remember another time in my quote-unquote analyzing political career that I said, no deal from the Dems. You can't do it. You can't cave on this one. And my reasoning behind it is very simply that I think that Trump is holding American workers hostage, and that the GOP Trump has turned into a terrorist organization, and I don't say that lightly, and that we have a history in this country of not doing deals with terrorists, and I want to know why we would do one now. He either says we'll open the government and we'll move on from there, and I don't get my whatever. You just can't do it on the backs of American people. That's what's got me so emphatic, and why I don't see how this deal kind of fixes that. So you and I are on the same page on that, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
You don't call them a terrorist organization, I'm sure, because you know me and my linguistics.
I just don't see what the Dems get out of something that opens the government for 2 weeks. I mean,
so there has to be more.
Get some money back in their pockets, but it doesn't really solve the problem. No. I mean, I think as I said to you a week ago or maybe earlier, if these were normal times, right? Like they could split the difference, they could do this, and you just repair some of the current fencing, maybe add a little more fencing, yada yada.
Yeah, I think first that you know how I feel about it. So
No, I know you're in the don't negotiate with terrorists.
Right, that's where I am.
But we actually have a long history of negotiating.
Well, that's just that's besides the point. And it's done behind closed doors, and it's
the
not
Ayatollah. But,
but we don't do it out in public. I mean, this is this is such a big story publicly at this point, kind of thing. Well, we'll have to wait to see what Ann Coulter says, because
obviously he's not going to make everyone happy.
I mean, she's the deciding figure in all of this for the Republicans. We're speculating. I say we move on because let's see what comes out. This is literally just breaking as
the broken clock twice a day, thing. She did say the other day, which I thought was intriguing, like, why don't Dems just trade for a really big minimum wage hike? Or, why don't they start to throw in some things into this deal they've wanted?
Because that's not the point. And of course she would say that. It's not the issue. How about they say, not a temporary deal for DACA, we will make a final deal. They can stay. Yeah. But
right. But no, I didn't say they should cave on temporary DACA. That's crazy. But I'm just saying, if
I know you're reasonable.
If at the end of the day, right, this does not end with like Trump totally backing down 100%, and it might. But let's say it doesn't, and he gets some wall stuff, barrier, slats, whatever you want to call it. Then the Dems would be wise to get, maximum pop, whether it's permanent DACA, minimum wage. They should look at their Christmas shopping list.
Well, see, I could go with on. We could spend the whole show on this because I still say no, they can't do it. The party where it is right now, the Democratic Party where it is right now, would be all the goodwill that Nancy has gone.
Well, let's see it. Okay. Well, let's see
we also have to think about preserving.
Maybe look, he managed to go bankrupt owning a casino, so maybe he's like such a bad deal maker that he'll just cave and there won't be.
Well, I think he's looking at his poll numbers, and maybe that's something we can discuss before we move on to other things. And his poll numbers are just getting hit. I mean, really badly. Really badly. I mean, I don't think he ever expected this to happen. I mean, the public is just not with him on this, and the independents are not with him on this. There's a 7-point jump from December 30th to 31st. 17% of independents said the congressional Democrats were primary, but now it's up that it's the Republicans who are responsible, and the Dems are doing fine. It was only up by 1. So I think he's got to look at that. And there are other polls that we'll talk about in a minute that I think he's going to find that are scaring him.
Yeah. I mean,
so I think she's on the winning side of this. So, but there's Chuck Schumer. There's Chuck Schumer. Should we talk about Chuck Schumer? He's such a wimp.
See, I think he gets a somewhat bad rap. Okay, go ahead.
I knew you were going to tell me that.
Sorry, what?
No. He is. He's the big caver. He's just, Mr. Old fashioned, moderate. We can work out a deal.
And then Norma Ray over here doesn't like him. But why?
You just call me Norma Ray. Well, I've been called worse. I love Norma Ray. What was the sign that she had up?
I had a tarbell over here.
God, in that great scene, Sally Field. I just think he's not for this climate. Look, he's a terrific.
He's not a wartime concept.
He's not a one. Right. Brilliantly said. Brilliantly said. I think that's a problem for him.
Tom, you're out.
So and I think Nancy, right. And Nancy's giving him, the old. She's keeping him going.
Remember, they're in different positions,
Well, they are, but she's running the show, honey. He's not. She is. You can tell.
Because they're in different. I mean, she was.
Well, I see what you're saying.
If she hadn't gotten the House and he'd somehow gotten the Senate, it would seem different too. But I agree. Look, he does not have Mitch McConnell's.
He doesn't have the killer instinct.
He does not have the killer instinct.
Yeah. You got to have the killer instinct. That's what we're playing. Speaking of Mitch McConnell, he just said moments ago that the greatest thing that he ever did was the Supreme Court Justice. Merit, which I think is also going to be the biggest. He's going to go down in history horribly for that, because I think at that moment changed politics for a long time. Another story breaking very quick: the NRA. Is being investigated by Mueller. And I know that's going to make you happy because that brings up your friend Butina.
Yes, Mary Butina. Yes, I cannot get enough of the Red Sparrow.
But we're going to talk about her in a minute. I want to go back to Giuliani. Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah, Rudy. What
Is Rudy okay?
If Trump had just gone with legal Zoom. Where you be your own lawyer,
It may actually be
just
that
one of those billboard lawyers, injured.
What did you take today? Oh, that birthday. You were today, darling. I love it. It's all that sugar from yesterday.
It's early senility, but
no. It was the cake. Here is something that's very important, though. I mean, you're not off by what you said if you take the joke out of it, because in a way, that's why he put Giuliani. Giuliani. I don't know why Giuliani took the role on as court jester for this dude, because he had some kind of reputation before all of this. He's finished. Yeah. And what was the point? I mean, what was the point? I'm not even sure. But let's go to last Sunday when he changed the timeline. Yeah, I think he was on Chuck.
Right.
Chuck's show on MSNBC, on NBC, on Meet the Press.
Yeah, changed the timeline of how long Trump was negotiating to build a hotel in Moscow.
And that timeline took us into the presidency. Yes?
It took us basically until the election day, as I understood it.
Right. Something. It's a little murky.
Trump and everyone said publicly, oh no, he'd given up on that.
Well, he actually said he never had anything to do with Russia, period, and there are 1,000.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right, that's true. And then, boom.
Right. So this on the heels of the BuzzFeed allegations.
Right.
So that story was that
BuzzFeed had a story, I can't remember when it was, the end of last week, earlier this week, in which they said that via sources that Trump had instructed Michael Cohen to lie to the Congress when he testified about all of these questions. Right. And the special counsel's office took the unusual step of issuing a kind of rebuke of the story. Now, some people, kind of looked at the rebuke and thought maybe it allowed some wiggle room. Others have looked at it and say, no, it's pretty.
Wiggle room for who?
Wiggle room for the original Buzz story piece to be true about Trump instructing Cohen to lie.
Okay. So I bring those two together. You can see why. Because Rudy either said what he said on Sunday because the which was the stupidest moment because BuzzFeed was on the losing end of this because the special counsel comes out and makes a statement they hadn't done in 2 years. And, that would have been the story. And then Rudy comes and he changes the story completely, whatever, which tells me two things. I don't know if you're going to agree with me. One is there's some truth to what was in that BuzzFeed story. And, it was all that Mueller was trying to do was muddy the waters, which we'll talk about in a second. And the other one is that, he stepped on his own message. I mean, how stupid was that, Julie? I mean, you can look at it either way, but I think both are probably true. He set out to do one thing and it sort of backfired on him. But the thing I want to first talk about the BuzzFeed story because I'm curious as to what your take on the fact that Mueller came out and opened a mouth about it. What do you think that was about? Because I have a probably different theory than you do.
Well, I don't have strong feelings about it. I'm an admirer of Ben Smith, who runs BuzzFeed News and who had the courage to run the original dossier, that Steele dossier about Trump in its entirety. So, I take it very seriously when they're still insisting that the story is right. But
essentially right.
I don't think Mueller and his office would do this public pushback unless they had unless they had a genuine objection. In other words, I don't think they would do this just to, sort of muddy the waters. But so where does that leave me? I don't know. It's certainly plausible that Trump would tell him a lie. I mean, that doesn't seem beyond the pale at all for Trump. So that part of it.
Well, I'm thinking just because Mueller said what he said or his team put out their thing doesn't mean he was saying the entire story wasn't true. It could be a problem with part of it, but the story is essentially true. It's just like there's that. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? I mean, to my mind,
I know what you're saying.
It seems, people took it as too black and white. My other thing is these people who were the sources, which of course we don't know, were they from the New York part of the story, the Southern District, doing their thing? Because a lot of this is being farmed out. And that's what his objection was, that it was implicating it was Mueller and maybe it wasn't Mueller.
Right.
That was the thing. I guess I'm saying it could be inaccurate, but that doesn't mean the story's not true.
No, that's certainly.
I don't think a lot of people went down that avenue with the story. That's what I'm thinking. So I do think that why in the world would BuzzFeed go on air on every show, major, and say we're standing by our story, unless they're standing by the story and they have reason to stand by the story. You're the journalist. Talk to me.
I have sources that are in a position to know that have convinced them that this happened, and that could be from the U.S. It could be from the special counsel's office. It could be, as you said, from the Southern District of New York's office. It could be from the FBI. It could be from other attorneys involved in this case. It could be from the congressional side. There is a universe of people that have some insight into this, but I just don't know.
Okay. But you can see why I'm going where I'm going, right?
No, I'm not saying it's loopy to think of it that way. No, it's plausible, but I just don't know.
And then, of course, Giuliani goes back, and now he's changing the story all over again. I mean, the story, changes whatever he says at 1 o'clock, at 2 o'clock, it's going to be something else. And at 3, it's going to be another story. So, of course, a lot of journalists are saying, well, he's just throwing mud out there because he wants to muddy the waters and he wants to confuse the people because he believes, and Trump believes, that this whole thing is going to be fought in the court of public opinion. And he's doing Trump's bidding, which is being cynical, because everything Trump does is cynical.
Right.
And, if you confuse the average Joe, you win, because they're like, I don't get, right. Whatever Trump says, whatever Giuliani says, does that account for all of this crazy?
I think you got a lot of things going on, right? I mean, you got a crazy friend/client in Trump who's just telling you all the time, get out there, no one's defending me. And then you've got the fact that Rudy likes attention. He's a former mayor of New York. He was always in the public eye. And, I think he clearly likes being back in it. He's got a fourth wife to support or whatever. So, he's like
a fourth divorce.
And then I think there is a little, I don't want to say dementia, but it's like there's something off about him. Like whatever you thought of him in the 90s, whether you thought he was a great mayor or, a crap mayor or whatever, he was a formidable figure. Now he really does seem like, Uncle Junior on The Sopranos.
Yeah, I mean, no, really, he's Michael Corleone.
There's
Not Michael,
like,
he's Fredo.
Yeah, well, Fredo's weak. This is more like sort of like the lion in winter, he's sort of doddering. But the bottom line is, look, you want a public strategy in a trial to influence the jury pool. In something like this, you want to be able to sort of nail down, a permanent bulwark in the Senate that makes any possibility of impeachment impossible. And you want to set it up so that it's a deterrent to the House going down this road. And I don't think he's giving them the right stuff, He should either sort of go with a narrow, like Fox-only strategy of just,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's the liberals are coming to get him, which, isn't true, but it would have a certain logic. And, but this sort of talking to everyone and then just kind of, having to correct himself 10 minutes later, that doesn't help Trump's impeachment strategy.
No, and it's interesting to me because I think that when you listen to the people who it counts what they say, they get what Giuliani is up to and onto and doing and what Trump is trying to accomplish in all of this. And it all stinks of the one same thing, Matt. Trump is guilty as hell because there is no reason to do what they're doing unless Trump is guilty as hell. I will tell you, Frank Figliuzzi, who is a former FBI
right, sure,
was just on MSNBC right before we started recording, and he astonished me and everybody who was listening to that show. And he said at this point, he thinks this is a far worse story than any of us believe, and that the Mueller and Congress is going to try and cover a lot of it up because it is that bad. And he started to go through the A to B to C to D to why he's getting to where he is, because he was one of the people in the beginning going, you're all over the top on this. It was on Nicole Wallace's show, which I'm sure you all can get on YouTube or at MSNBC.
His take is it's so bad that even Mueller and Democrats in Congress would not want.
They're gonna hide a lot of it.
Because it would just be so damaging to the country and the world, standing in the world.
Right. How do you like that? And this is not a guy who is an alarmist by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
So I took that with like, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, that's a big deal.
But I've always thought that. And I've always thought that part of the reason that this has been handled so weirdly by everybody, and I'll even give this to the Republicans, is if in fact this really was a man buying the presidency hook, line, and sinker in every illegal way possible, what do you do with that? What do you do with that? It leaves us in the most untenable position if that's the fact. Think about it. What do you do about Hillary? What do you do about election results? What do you do about stabilizing? Because you're going to have two sides of the, you're going to have the people on the right who have so much invested in Trump that they can't even admit that he's guilty, because it's their own egos. And you have the people on the left going, now wait a minute here, this is not fair. This could upset the apple cart going 1861. If that is all true, we probably will never know. That's my theory.
Well, that's possible. I mean, we can look at history, right? I mean, with Watergate,
different,
but
different. There wasn't a foreign government involved.
Policy changes came out of it.
I mean, this is deep.
I mean, you want enough of it to get out so that some changes are.
But that's not what they're interested in. They're interested in preserving and protecting and defending. That's what they're interested in. I think at the end of the day, if they were all party to some really, really, really horrendous stuff that looks like it's starting to become true, because we're seeing
you mean the Trump campaign?
No, I think Congress and the Supreme Court, I mean the other branches of government, start to get a little bit serious and say, wait a second, this is weird. But part of me thinks part of those people know it anyway, how bad it really is, the story.
It's hard to imagine whatever it is, would stay secret.
I don't know. I think there's a lot that stays secret. Not to be like, conspiracy theory and all of that, but I do think at some point, people will start to worry about really upending the country. All right. Maybe we're going off. Maybe that's just me being crazy. I don't think so, though.
Okay.
I don't think that.
Well,
I'm totally. I mean, look, you're in the journalistic community far more than I am. What do you pick up from people who are looking into all of this? That's a question I need to ask you.
Well, look, I think people are, taking all of the Russia stuff very seriously. They're, I think, more seriously all the time. And, I think nothing seems implausible at this point.
So, but you've seen that change, because in the beginning, journalists were really not wanting to go down this route.
Well, I think everybody wanted to go down there. I mean, in other words, I think there's been interest in Russia since 2016. It was essential to the debates with Hillary, and there's been interest in it, but there just wasn't, there wasn't quite enough of a roadmap. Now there looks like there's much more of a roadmap. I mean, it's built every month with
something new breaks. Something new comes to light.
Yeah.
Manafort's
involvement.
Oh boy. Yeah.
That made it more interesting. The fact that there are all these extra meetings. First there was just that one meeting, then there's all these other meetings. I mean, look, I think it's all very, there's a lot here. There's a lot here. And I don't know what it is in the end.
Well, your job is not to jump ahead of the story. My job is to jump ahead of the story.
Well, go,
I mean, it's interesting. Well, what more can we say other than let's wait to see what happens? Because by the time you and I talk next time, it's going to be even crazier. Because
exactly.
That's just
be in a different world.
We could be completely. Who knows what's going to happen? Another story I'm going to bring up. I bring it up, and I bring it up hesitantly, because even though it's a huge meme right now in the zeitgeist of America, this Native American story and what happened with the MAGA Red Hat Kid Catholic school, Covington Catholic school students,
right,
and the so-called Vietnam vet, which it turns out he may not be a Vietnam vet. He's definitely Native American. Where that story is of course it's a divide, the right things. Well, it's a Rorschach test as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
Wherever you're coming from, that's how you're going to see it. But there is an interesting point to the story, which is it turns out that this kid, this Nick Sandeman, who to me looked like he was smirking, and if he were my kid, I would have smacked his little face, because honest to God, that's just, but that being said, a Louisville PR firm picked up the kid, and he's all over the place, and GMA, this one, that one, the next one, NBC, Today's Show. And it's a PR firm close to Mitch McConnell.
Oh, sure.
This sickens me. Particularly because this also brought up the thing of MAGA hats. The red MAGA hats are now the symbol of racism. It's the new, white cap. What did they used to call the Ku Klux Klan used to wear?
Hood.
Hood, thank you. The hood. The hood. Wow. It's the new hood. We can't say much on it because, like I said, it's a Rorschach test. I don't think we've meted out yet exactly what happened. But what are your thoughts? Anything very quickly, because I want to move on.
Well, I didn't watch any of the videos that people are, studying, like JFK assassination, Zapruder film, frame by frame to try to piece this together. I didn't watch the originals. I haven't watched any of the videos. I've just seen stories about it. I've seen maybe just photos. I cannot imagine parents saying, this is how I want my child to be. Even if you take their story at its face value, take this kid's story, they first of all, if you're gonna turn your kids into political actors by having them go to the Right to Life March, then they shouldn't be wearing MAGA hats.
Right. Yeah.
It should be a more solemn occasion. So that's the first thing. And then second, the whole idea that they were there to peaceably, intercede between Black Hebrews and a couple of Native Americans. It just seems loopy. I just cannot, look, I'm the son of a 20-year-old. I cannot tell you how upset I'd be if I saw any behavior like that.
Exactly. So, we talked about it, and that's good, but I think what we're going to have to do with that story is let it percolate a little bit, because, If we can ever,
I don't think we're going to bring a lot to this one.
No, but I think it was fair to bring it up. Okay, the Supreme Court weighed in on some issues, and one was the transgender ban takes effect while the case proceeds. That's what they say. There you have Judge Kavanaugh's influence on the court. 5-4. Here we go. Right. Because that one had been through there before, and it wasn't. The Supreme Court also is not taking action on the Dreamer appeal. That interested me, but I think that was John Roberts, right? What, don't you?
Yeah, if I had to guess, I don't think he wants to have to wade in on that.
Right.
He wants to keep the court out of this, but he couldn't keep he couldn't hold back the forces on guns, which was interesting. They are going to take a big gun case.
Yes, and here we go again. But that may not be so powerful at the end of this. And that's a New York story, which is so weird. But again, I think Mueller's going to have some influence with the NRA on that one. Be careful about those guns in the next year.
Right.
I think, right? Don't you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that a lot of elected officials and gun control groups have been worried about is that since in the nearly 10 years since the Supreme Court ruled that there is an individual right to gun ownership, they also had said, but they had also given states and communities great latitude to regulate them. So gun control bans have been upheld lots of places, bans on sales of AR-15s and other things have been upheld by lower courts, even conservative jurists have upheld them, but I think the more pro-Second Amendment types have really want to get in there and get the court to start striking down some of those ordinances. And New York is the first time they're really taking one up.
Yeah, so, interesting state to do that in, and that ought to,
I think on the transgender, I think the courts generally have given the military pretty big discretion in terms of any kind of regulating of personal life, whether it's Sikh headdresses or, lots of things. I think they just tend to give the military more latitude. And I think it's awful policy. I think there's no reason. I have not seen one rational reason for this, hateful policy.
Yes, you do. It's called Trump.
Well, yeah, it's called Trump. Right. I'll be the best LGBTQ president in history, except for the T. Did not mean the T.
He did not mean the T. I mean, it's just bizarre.
I mean, it's just, it's just beating up.
Well, that's what he likes to do. I mean, that's his whole MO. Let's beat up anybody,
You're beating up, several hundred people who are trying to, serve their country, and they're doing it now and, not causing any problems. And it's, it's odious. And but I think that, the court is going to uphold it. And, it's too bad. I just hope,
absolutely.
that policy is reversed before long.
Right. I'm going to move real quick because we have a couple of things I want to get to and we're running late.
Sure.
But one of them is Junior Trump. Junior Trump, who, by the way, I was thinking about the other day, the only thing that he's ever done in his life is be junior. So everything about him is because he's junior. All right. So we get...
Saturday Night Live ruined everybody's perspective by making people think Eric is the dumb one.
Seriously.
Not
the case. So Junior. he grows a beard and he thinks he looks so hot to trot. But I have to tell you something. I don't remember where I saw him talking. It was on a clip. He must have been on Fox this morning. He's got this beard that's a lovely beard with a little bit of gray in it. Okay. The guy looks like he is on his way to Dachau. I can't tell you how much weight he's lost. He looks like Anxiety City. He was talking so fast that I couldn't even keep up with him. And you know damn well that I talk that fast when I'm regularly in my, day job. He's looking like he is scared out of his mind, honey. Go look at him and tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I think that's right. And, I was talking to someone who's was a very close observer for all these things the other day. And he believes that Junior has much more legal exposure than Jared. That Jared got serious legal representation very early and has been very careful about more things than people think.
Right.
And the Juniors really has,
he's in the thick of it. He's
the one who's got, storefront lawyer and is not been careful. And
what a mess.
And also, I mean, there's just everything about the guy is really
he got the worst genes of both of the mother and father.
You know, I mean,
did.
I'm divorced, and there's a certain decorum before you're like running around with your girlfriend before, you know, especially if you have kids.
He's his father's son. Come on.
And he's just he's a
sleaze.
I can't imagine Kimberly Guilfoyle's going to stick around.
For him to go to jail, you mean? Yeah, she's going to go visit him in her pokies. She had an outfit on the other day.
It's going to be our first White House wedding since Trish Nixon, you know?
No, but let's speak about, let me break in on that. Some really great, wonderful news just broke. Chelsea Clinton is pregnant with her third child.
Oh, that's nice.
So isn't that nice? And look, Hillary gets to be a grandma again, which is lovely.
I have no ill will for the guy, but he's just got a very
bad demeanor.
A really bad demeanor. Yeah, I don't say that. Yeah. I know people hate him.
Yeah, and if you say it, it's really true because you don't say that bad about anybody.
I really don't, but he's just such a loop. I mean, he had a tweet today calling Andrea Mitchell a leftist. I'm pretty
Did he really?
I'm pretty sure Mrs. Allen Greenspan.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. That is so hilarious. I don't get him at all. I don't get him why they let him loose, but you know, what can you do?
I have to say he doesn't. I mean this seriously. He's not as charming as his father.
I get what you're saying. He's not.
Like his father's got a little bit of a twinkle sometimes.
Right? Yeah. No, his father definitely does.
He can occasionally be funny. You know, I'm not saying that as an admirer of Trump. Obviously, I'm not. But this guy, it's just unbelievable.
Well, you know, what are you going to do? I'm surprised his mother hasn't, you know, cut him off at the knees and said, "Darling, you must fix your attitude." Okay, here's some trivia. Gossip. Senator Joni Ernst. I find this woman unbelievable. She said she got me so angry today because they were asking her about the shutdown and the people who
served our country in the military. She seems like she butchered hogs.
She butchered hogs, and she has absolutely the same amount of empathy as Trump does. She went on a tirade today and saying nobody made any problems about the government being closed when it was Obama or when it was Clinton or it was anybody, just us. Again, not a word about the fact that people can't eat, but hello, she angered me. But here's why you may not like her as much as you do. She apparently is getting divorced, and the divorce papers came through.
Oh.
And in there, she said that she is divorcing her husband because he prevented her from being Trump's vice president choice. She was it. And the husband said no. Do.
Really?
Page 6.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I thought I'd throw that out. It also said that he had hit her, he did this, he did that.
People do throw a lot of things into divorce petitions.
They do, but I don't think that she would have said something that amazing if there wasn't some truth to it, because she knew that would be something that was going to finally get out. I'm surprised it wasn't a sealed court document, by the way. That just kind of struck me as incredibly odd, given who she is.
Well, family values, right? Family values.
You made my case for me.
Family values.
Yeah, she's very cold-hearted, that one, and I just don't have any patience for that. You know, I just don't. Okay, we have women who have joined the fold. I do want to mention that. I don't think we really have time to talk about it, but we have a lot of Democratic women who have said that they're running for president, and that's a good thing, I suspect. Polls are kind of interesting on those. Trump versus Biden, 53, Trump 41, Bernie 51. Trump 41, Harris 48, Trump 41, Warren 48, Trump 42, O'Rourke 47, Trump 41, Gillibrand 47, Trump 42, Booker 47, Trump 42. Maybe that's why they're going to cut a deal for Thursday.
Could be. I mean, he's look, he's not popular.
Wait a minute.
Popular.
I'm still stuck on my could be. Can I have a could be? Can I have your good could be?
Could be. Could be. Could be.
Why does that crack me up so much, man?
Because I always say it. Could be.
Yeah, I think that says a lot right there, don't you?
42, but you know, all he has to do is get to 45, and then have Jill Stein run and Mike Bloomberg run, and he might get the presidency again. So
I don't know. I'll leave you on that note. Does he or does he not get the presidency again, or will he be out?
No one knows. But look, the more the merrier on the Democrats, right? Come on, the water's fine. Let's have.
I'm worried about them because I think they're making mistakes already. That they're just.
Well, I agree. I agree. With that.
And honestly, are you excited about any of these people? Really?
Well, I've been through this enough where I've seen them. They all look small at the beginning, and then they start to look bigger.
I can't see any of them looking bigger. I can't. I think they're too far to the left, but that's, other than,
Yeah.
I think there's that.
I hear where you're coming from, but that's just where we are.
I don't, you and I talked about this months ago, and we talked about, could we pull somebody in from, from the military or from this country really needs a leader, and these are stars these are starlets in the making. This worries me. I can't believe that the Dems can't come up with something better than this. I just don't. I won't even tell you who I'm leaning towards because you'll go, huh? What?
Well, who?
Stay tuned. Maybe I'll tell you next week.
Oh, my God. Okay. Hold that thought for next week.
We'll hold it for next week. That's it, buddy. We went 10 over. My staff is going to go nuts if I got to take this down to 40 minutes.
All right.
All right. Thank you, sweetie.
Bye.
Bye.
You're the best. Bye.
You are listening to the Hallie Casser-Jayne Show. The Hallie Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern at HallieCasserJayne.com and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find me on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, on all your favorite apps. You can find the Hallie Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device, too. Just say, The Hallie Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at The Hallie CJ Show. Bill Schneider, a leading and well-respected political analyst, has covered American politics in every presidential election since 1964. For much of his career, he served as CNN's senior political analyst. He currently serves as the Omar L. and Nancy Hurst Professor at George Mason University's School of Public Policy and is also currently teaching at George Mason University. He is the author of the important book Standoff, How America Became Ungovernable, a work of incisive history and fresh reporting about the tumultuous American political landscape today. In Standoff, Schneider speaks to American government having been designed to be weak, asserting that for government to work, there has to be a crisis. An overwhelming sense of public urgency that can break down blockages and lubricate the system. He speaks to populism and the power of public opinion in U.S. politics. And of course, Schneider has a few words to say about Donald J. Trump. Does it all boil down to American politics today as a war between public opinion, which longs for unity, and politics, which thrives on division? Let's talk to the author of Standoff, Bill Schneider. So nice to have you here, Bill. I've been a long-time fan. Miss you.
Thank you.
Seeing you as much on TV as we used to. You ought to come back.
Yeah. I still do Heel TV, but that's a podcast.
Yeah. But here you are, right smack dab in the middle of all of it. We gave the intro what you're up to these days and talked about the book a little bit to get my listeners going. But here you and I are now. So let's see what we've come up with, or what we do come up with. You've been covering politics forever, and I'm wondering what your impression is of our politics today.
Of what?
I'm wondering what your impression is of our politics today. I mean, we had Nixon, we had the 60s. Things were pretty raucous back then. And if we go back to 1861, right, all hell broke loose. So I'm going to say this to you. Let me just say one thing to you.
The student once asked me in my class, is this the most divided we've ever been as a country?
Is it?
And I said, son, we once had a civil war.
And that's
750,000 people died in the Civil War. We're not anywhere, thank God, close to that. But you know that half of Americans in the polls say they expect a second Civil War to start in their lifetime?
I'm not surprised. Are you?
Well, things are just that intense. I'd say this is the most divided we have been since the Civil War.
So let me ask you this. With that in mind, is a civil war the only way, after all these years of this nonsense, that we're going to be able to purge the hate that's fueling this national nightmare?
Well, generally the solution is a crisis. I'm not saying it has to be a civil war. It can be any kind of crisis. It can be Sputnik in the 50s. It could be financial crash in the 2000s. It could be a climate disaster. I mean, whenever there's a crisis, Americans come together. It can be foreign origin. It can be a natural disaster. Nobody wants a crisis to occur, but that's when the United States suddenly becomes governable, because there's so much urgency from the public on office holders to do what's necessary to fix the problem that they find that they have to work together to survive.
Isn't that pretty awful? So what does that make us, a government by hysterical, crisis? By the way, what a perfect person to be in office to maybe bring us to that crisis and bring us all together, right?
It is the reason why politicians go around the country declaring crises. We've had an education crisis, an environmental crisis, a drug crisis. We've had crises declared all the time. My job has always been to determine when the crisis is real and when it's being created by politicians. President Trump just spoke the other week about the border crisis. Most Americans, even those close to the border, don't really see it as a crisis. They see it as a problem, but not a crisis. But the president is talking it up. Meanwhile, he's trying to play down the shutdown as a crisis, because that's what the Democrats are saying. The shutdown is a crisis. We have to do something immediately. And the president is doing everything he can to mitigate the impact of the shutdown, because he doesn't want that to become a crisis.
So what, are we a nation of histrionic presidents or histrionic politicians? Well, it seems bizarre to me that that's where we are, that's where we have to go in order to make mountains move, if you will.
Well, that's because of the way our Constitution was designed. It was designed for limited government. The people who wrote the Constitution did not want strong government. The British parliamentary system is strong government. They call it an elected dictatorship. Once the government is in office, it can do basically anything it wants, although we're now seeing that there are limits there too. But in the United States, we have checks and balances, separation of power. We have a federalist system with power divided between the states and the federal government. It's very, very easy to stop things from happening. Look how long it took us to get a national health care program passed. It took decades to get that to happen, even though people thought it was a serious problem. It's very difficult to get things to happen here, because we do need a sense of urgency, and we do need public pressure on our institutions to act. Without that kind of pressure, you can stop things all the time.
I want to take you here. The title of your book is The Standoff. Let's get back to the beginning. Standoff. How America became ungovernable. So you feel America's reached a point where it's absolutely ungovernable? Polarization on steroids? That's why you wrote this book? You wanted to go back? And I
wanted to go back to my whole lifetime, really. It's partly autobiographical, biographical. But it is how we reached the point where the government isn't working. And there's no better example of the standoff than exactly what's happening right now, where you can't make any progress on anything because so much of the federal government is shut down, and Democrats don't even talk to Republicans anymore. They don't hang out together. There's no cross-party discussions going on at all. I remember I once saw Bill Clinton. He was doing a public event, and there was a Tea Party supporter who stood up, and the woman said, "Mr. President," this was Bill Clinton, she said, "I don't approve of compromise, because compromise means selling out. I'm in the Tea Party. We don't believe in selling out. We would believe you should stick to your principles," which is, of course, what President Trump is doing, and the Republican Party. President Clinton had answered in a very interesting way. He said, "Madam, read the Constitution. It might as well be called, let's make a deal."
That's true. But how did it get to be this bad where really, because you remember the days when they all used to go out together and share time in Washington and have a drink at the end of the day and befriend, we hear that all the time, and some of us even remember when that was true. That isn't true now, and it gets less and less true. I want to say one thing to you, though, before you answer that, because in this particular issue with this shutdown, I don't like when there is no compromise. I don't like when there's no talking, and I rail about that on this show all the time. But in this instance, I think it's correct, because I think Trump, how many shutdowns has he been over? 3? This is the 3rd. Every time he doesn't get his way, he does the shutdown thing. I call the GOP, it's like GOP terrorists. It's government by terrorism. And if Pelosi gives in on this shutdown, look, we have a policy in this country. We don't negotiate with terrorists. I think you have to stop holding the government hostage, and then you can move forward. That's where I am on this one. I don't remember ever saying that on air about any other issue, ever.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Look, first of all, I like the way the Democrats are referring to this. They call the shutdown hostage taking.
It is.
They say we don't negotiate with hostage takers. The president is committing an act of extortion. He's saying to the Democrats, unless you give me the money I want to build my wall, I'm going to hold the entire federal government hostage. That's no way to do business. It's not even a way to make a deal. I mean, it's just threatening people back and forth, instead of taking it one step at a time. Americans continue to approve of compromise, and they think compromise should be the case. But any compromise that's acceptable to Trump is going to have to involve the wall, because he has staked his authority, his legacy, his reputation on building that wall. Remember, he's a builder, and a builder is somebody, and he's done this all his life, is somebody who will not take any no for an answer. They will simply continue to pressure, to cadge people, to say, I want the money, I want to build my wall, I want to build my building, I want to build my skyscraper, and if it doesn't work the first time, they'll just come back again and again and again until they get what they want. That's how he operates.
Can I make the point that he has two women driving him crazy right now? Not one, but two. He's got one on the right and one on the left. It's really kind of a funny position for this, of all people, to get himself in the middle of.
Oh, yeah.
You're right. I want to dissect some of your ideas. You made your point about, the American government was designed to be weak. Talk to me about populism. That's a word that's thrown around a lot lately, not just in America, but across the European peninsulas also. Talk to me about that.
Well, I write in the book that the United States is the most populous country in the world. Next to the United States, the rest of the world is Saudi Arabia. I mean, here the people really do rule, and I use a lot of small examples, like the fact that the government mints all these dollar coins. You've probably seen them, Susan B. Anthony dollar coins, Sacagawea dollar coins. Americans simply say, to hell with it. We're not going to use them. They're all locked up in mints, even though the vending machine operators would love them. Americans simply won't be told what to do. We have 90% of jury trials in the world in the United States. We elect judges. No other country does that. Popular justice is not a very attractive thing. We don't elect federal judges, although a lot of conservatives would like to see us start doing that, but we do elect state and local judges. And popular justice has no impressive history. Popular justice in the United States was lynching.
Right.
So we have a very populist culture, and in fact, it affects our politics as well. In fact, I argue in the book that given the fact that our system was designed to be not very workable, and it works only when there's a crisis, populism and public opinion are a critical factor, because politicians will respond to public pressure. When people start screaming, do something about this crisis, about the financial crash, about the 9/11 terrorist attacks, about the launching of Sputnik, about the civil rights problem in the 1960s, about the Vietnam or Iraq War. When the people start putting pressure on government has no choice but to respond, because otherwise they're going to lose their jobs. That's where populism is a very powerful and productive force.
There's something weird about it right now, though, because if we look at how this whole thing came about, leaving out Russia, he's got, 30% of the base, Trump?
30% of the public basically are his core supporters right now.
And yet they're running the show. I mean, it's them. They make everything is being done around him worrying about that percentage, which is hardly the majority. I find that extraordinary. Historically, that's kind of weird. It's a little out of the norm.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And Republicans didn't like it in the midterm in November when Trump made absolutely no appeal to swing voters. He pays no attention to them. He only caters to his base. That's all that matters to him. And he believes that's how he got elected, and that's how he's going to get reelected, even though they're far from a majority of the country. Trump is an unusual president for one reason. He is the most divisive president we've ever had, but other presidents have created division. It didn't start with Trump. Reagan had divisive policies. Obama had divisive policies like Obamacare. But Trump is different in this respect. He is deliberately divisive. He exploits the division of the country that started before he became president. But to be deliberately divisive, to set out to divide the country, that no other president has done. Not even Abraham Lincoln, who was elected really to heal the country's division and made that his life's purpose. Well, Trump deliberately divides the country and makes the divisions worse and worse. No other president has done that.
It's bizarre to me that he's gotten away with it. I mean, let me take you on a little bit of a different path, and I think maybe we can bring it back to my last sentence. The moral majority of evangelical Christians, the names change, but the war on culture continues. And right now, it's being led by this deeply immoral Donald Trump, right?
Yes.
So think about that. It's still what the fight is all about. It's still, white supremacy, white men in a war to maintain their control over women, abortion rights, even though, because we're going back to what you say about populism, 7 in 10 Americans support reproductive rights. And yet these 38%, which is what I think we're talking about, are the ones who are going, no. And they're making this the issues. Women's rights. Most Americans are not with them, and yet they control. So, Bill, if power are the people, why so often doesn't majority rule? I know you address it in your wonderful book.
I do talk about that. That's the problem is single-issue voters. There are voters, usually on the right, sometimes on the left during an anti-war movement, but usually on the right, who care so deeply about their issue, whether it's guns or immigration, that they essentially communicate to politicians, if you don't vote the way I think you should on this issue, I can never vote for you, and I don't care what else you believe, what else you do, what else you say. That issue, say gun rights, is the only issue I care about. When a group has views like that, they have a lot of power because the politician knows that he can't cross that group without automatically losing their support, even though they're not a majority. On the other side of the issue, people who support gun control, people who support immigration reform, they have a lot of issues they care about. And they're not so determined that they can say to politicians, you'd better support immigration reform, or you'd better support gun control, or I will never vote for you. They don't have that same single-issue mentality. That's how single-issue groups can hold the agenda of the country hostage.
So this isn't working.
It's not working. No, of course it's not working. Bill Clinton once, I keep quoting him, he's the shrewdest political analyst alive.
I agree.
Bill Clinton once said, if you look back at the 60s and you think they did more good than harm, you're a Democrat. If you think they did more harm than good, you're a Republican. That's Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, both children of the 60s. Bill Clinton, they did more good than harm. Bush, they did more harm than good. That's the division in this country. And what I argue is the reason for our polarization is that it is a division over values, not over interests. Interests can be negotiated and compromised. In the 30s, the big division in American politics was between business and labor. If you were pro-business, you were a Republican. Pro-labor, you were a Democrat. Those differences could be hashed out. They could be discussed and compromised. But differences in values means differences in beliefs about right and wrong. It is very difficult or impossible, really, to compromise on issues of right and wrong, which is what the politics started to be about going back to the 1960s.
But I think the politicians are playing the people, and maybe that, maybe all of this is shouldn't be put on the politicians or even on the structure of the American government, but maybe the people are wrong too. A quote from your book, this from President Obama, preserving our individual freedoms ultimately requires collective action. And then from President Reagan, you remember, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. This is soundbite politics, and either ignorant, ill-informed, dogmatic. Let's talk about the people. They've got to take some responsibility for this.
Yeah, they do. And the division of values cuts very, very deep into our culture. That's why it's called a culture war. You find the best educated, more sophisticated voters are tending to vote Democratic. Less well-educated are now voting Republican. The Bureau of Labor Statistics just came out with the list of the best educated and the least educated states. The 10 best educated states, 9 of them, all but Utah, voted for Hillary Clinton. The 10 least well-educated states, 9 of them, all except Nevada, voted for Donald Trump. Education has become the critical variable in our politics. Right now, the wealthier you are, the more likely you are to vote Republican. The better educated you are, the more likely you are to vote Democratic. That's Mitt Romney, who went to Harvard and votes his interests, namely his wealth, and Barack Obama, who also went to Harvard. He votes his values, which are liberal cultural values. That's a big division. And usually when I explain that to students, a student stands up and he says, well, what about wealthy people who are also well-educated? What do? They get pulled in different directions. They're cross-pressured. If they vote their economic interests, they vote Republican. If they vote their values, they're going to vote Democratic. That's the big division in American politics today.
Is it wrong to say that the most successful this country has ever been is when it did vote its values and did not vote its interests, or the other way around?
Well, usually interests can be dealt with in our politics very easily. Values are very difficult to deal with. The most dramatic instance, of course, was the issue of human slavery in the 19th century. That could not be resolved through compromise, through negotiation. We had a whole history of compromises, the Missouri Compromise. We had various efforts to smooth over slavery issues. And eventually, of course, what it took, sadly, tragically, was a civil war before that could be settled. And even that didn't quite settle it because the South was able to institute a regime of what is really terrorism. That was the Jim Crow system that governed the South for about 80 years.
Well, having lived in the South for the last, I don't know, most of my life, I guess at this point, I would say to you, it still isn't resolved. That's the reality. That's what part of this fight is about, as a matter of fact. You know what, these Trump voters, they can't renege now, Bill. They're in so deep with him, even when he starts to hurt them. Their pride, I think, is so involved in this. I'm wondering whether or not they can ever say, oh, because if it comes up that they do get the goods on him on this Russia stuff and whatever else, you know, the lying, the this, that, and the other thing, that they can never get off their marks.
Yeah. Well, look, I think the right, even more than the left, the right is very sensitive to betrayal. You may remember last month in December, Congress passed a bill to reopen the government, and it did not include funding for the wall. It was a stopgap bill that would only reopen the government, I think, until February. And President Trump was about to sign it. He had signaled Republicans he would sign it, and Republican senators voted for it on that basis. Well, suddenly we heard from Rush Limbaugh that this is betrayal. This is a sellout. And we heard from Ann Coulter, this means that he's no different from Jeb Bush. Look, what we elected a president who stood us up. The right started to get agitated by this. They still are. They're shouting no amnesty all the time. So what President Trump did was he suddenly changed his mind, and he said, I'm not going to sign this bill because it would anger too many people in my base. And that's exactly what he is very sensitive to.
Fascinating. You know, one of the pluses of this shutdown, if we can call it a plus, is the fact that it's revealed something that I think most Americans and certainly most politicians didn't want to address, and that is that Trump's great economy ain't so great. What are we learning from this? Most of the people who work for the government, which is a pretty well-paying job, remember, those are the jobs people would go to because it was supposed to be such a great job and it was, you know, foolproof. It was secure.
You worked for the government because it was a secure job. You wouldn't get rich working for the government, but you would have a secure job. That was the attraction.
And it was
now
also
it's no longer secure.
Right. It's not only is it no longer secure, but the pay isn't so wonderful either. These people are living paycheck to paycheck. By the way, they're not. It's the whole middle class. 90% of the people that you talk to today are, you know, where they have $1,000 in their pocket, and that's a lot according to statistics right now. You know, sometimes things work in funny ways. You know, maybe these are things that need to be addressed along with education as to what we can do to fix, you know, the schisms that are going on in our government these days and in our politics and what have you. So, okay, here we are, right? What do you think about Congress? Think they're doing their job? You think that the Supreme Court's doing its job? Is co-equal branches of government, huh?
Well, Congress is not any longer a co-equal branch of government. They're subservient to any president. The presidential power has increased markedly, and all Congress can do once in a while is stop things from happening. But they can't really find a solution to the shutdown. They can't make that happen without the president's cooperation. We have a more and more presidential system of government. That's partly because of the media. Television is totally fixated on the president of the United States, and people want short-term solutions. The Internet has made a big difference. Social media seem to be governing the country right now, which demands quick and fast solutions that can be reduced to a slogan, make America great again. I mean, that's what Americans are responding to. I think social media has probably made just as much a difference today as television did back in the 1960s.
I agree with you there. What about Putin? You think that he's made a difference too?
Putin is certainly trying to make a difference, and that bothers a whole lot of Americans who, of course, don't trust him, can't stand him, and they just wonder what's going on here. Everyone is eagerly waiting for the Mueller report to see exactly how much collaboration there was and how contaminated President Trump is by his relationship with Russia. We simply don't know. But we saw that when the BuzzFeed story came out, the Democrats immediately jumped to attention and said, we're going to begin hearings for an impeachment impeachment proceeding. They're just that eager to do what, in fact, a lot of Democrats elected them to do, impeach this president.
I have my feelings on that subject, but that's for another day. Will he be impeached? And should he be impeached?
Well, Congress can impeach the president for anything it wants. High crimes and misdemeanors is what it says in the Constitution, but nobody, including lawyers, knows exactly what that means. Will he be impeached? If there is anything that is remotely impeachable, like that BuzzFeed story, which turned out to be unsubstantiated, according to Mueller, then they will proceed with impeachment, and that will take over the entire agenda. It did in 1998 when Bill Clinton was impeached. You remember in August 98, Bill Clinton decided he had to stage missile strikes on terrorist bases in Sudan and Afghanistan after terrorists had attacked American embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. It was a retribution for those attacks. It got interpreted by the entire media establishment as Clinton wagging the dog. People thought he was trying to distract attention from Monica Lewinsky. That's how impeachment takes over the entire agenda. Same thing will happen here. If Congress begins impeachment hearings, I'm not saying it shouldn't, but I know how this happens. It's the whole agenda, and it's likely to be the whole agenda right up until the beginning of the 2020 campaign, which actually has started to already, yeah. But it'll go right into the 2020 campaign year.
So, getting back to the title of your book, Standoff, does the standoff end? How does it end? Will it end? Who wins? Where are you on this? Or is it D all the above, or E? I don't know.
Well, we're waiting to see whether a crisis emerges and if the crisis will force the government to act. Right now, there are supposedly two crises, and they're competing for attention. One is the border crisis that the president talks about all the time. Drugs, terrorists, human trafficking, all those terrible things coming across the border, which are actually not coming across the border. But he calls it a terrible crisis and tries to alarm the American people who don't really feel it at this point. And the other is the shutdown crisis. You'll notice that the Trump White House is trying to make the shutdown as painless as possible. They're telling federal workers to go back to work. They're telling air traffic controllers to work without pay. Terrible things might happen with food safety inspections, all kinds of things the government does. But those two crises have not reached the dimensions of a real crisis yet, although I think in the race to become a real crisis, the government shutdown is likely to become more serious more quickly.
We live in unusual times. Boy, oh boy.
That's right.
Thank you, sir.
Fraught.
Fraught. So wonderful to talk to you. Come back again, won't you? I really, really, really enjoyed hearing your point of view. Thank you.
My pleasure talking to you.
I've been speaking with political analyst Bill Schneider, author of Standoff, How America Became Ungovernable. For more information about the book, visit simonandschuster.com. Follow Bill Schneider on Twitter at BillSchneiderDC. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Hallie Casser-Jayne Show. The Hallie Casser-Jayne Show is a production of Resec, LLC. Be sure to tune in to the Hallie Casser-Jayne Show at HallieCasserJayne.com or listen on your favorite app. New podcasts are posted Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern.